Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're staring down a team of super athletes.
Yeah.
Jim Brown's story didn't end with retirement. In many ways, that's where it truly began. But to understand why one letter changed the course of football history, you first have to go back to where it all started. In July 1966, Brown stood on a rain-soaked film set in England while production delays kept him thousands of miles away from Cleveland. At the very same time, Brown's owner, Art Modell, confidently told reporters exactly what he believed Jim Brown would do next. He assumed Brown would return, report to training camp, and fall in line. He couldn't have been more mistaken. There were no heated arguments, no legal battles, and no dramatic public confrontation. Instead, Brown sat alone in a hotel room with nothing but a typewriter and his thoughts. Before long, he typed a letter that instantly ended one of the greatest careers professional football has ever seen. At only 30 years old, while still playing at the highest level, Jim Brown chose to walk away on his own terms. That single decision would define his legacy almost as much as everything he accomplished on the field. What made Brown different wasn't just his incredible athletic ability, it was the way he carried himself. If you watch old game footage, one detail stands out immediately. After every punishing run, he was almost always the last player to get back on his feet. He never rushed to the huddle. He got up slowly, handed the football to the official, and calmly walked back to his teammates. It looked like exhaustion, but it wasn't. It was a calculated message to every defender who had just thrown everything they had at him. He wanted them wondering whether they had done any damage at all. Brown also believed success wasn't simply about race. He famously said the color that mattered most wasn't black or white, it was green. To him, real power came from economic independence, a philosophy that would shape much of his life after football. Decades later, even Art Modell admitted publicly that forcing Brown into that defining moment was one of the biggest mistakes of his career. To understand how Jim Brown reached that point, you have to start long before the NFL. He was born on February 17, 1936 on St. Simon's Island, Georgia. His father, a professional boxer who also gambled, disappeared from his life while Jim was still very young. His mother left for New York in search of work, leaving him to be raised by his great-grandmother in the segregated South. There was just one obstacle. Syracuse wasn't eager to bring him in. Years later, Brown openly said he believed racial discrimination played a major role in the school's reluctance to offer him a scholarship. Everything came together during his senior season. Against Colgate in November 1956, Brown delivered one of the greatest individual performances in college football history. He rushed for 197 yards, scored 6 touchdowns, kicked 7 extra points, and finished with an incredible 43 points by himself, a national record that stood for more than 3 decades. At Syracuse, Brown also became a first-team All-American in lacrosse. Many historians and former players still consider him one of the greatest lacrosse players ever to pick up a stick. His unmatched versatility eventually earned him induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the College Football Hall of Fame, and the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame, making him one of the most accomplished athletes in American sports history. By the time Brown left Syracuse, the university that once hesitated to accept him became known because of him. Then, in 1957, the Cleveland Browns selected him with the 6th overall pick in the NFL Draft. What happened next would forever change professional football.
Being drafted by the Cleveland Browns in 1957 was only the beginning. The bigger question was whether Jim Brown could dominate at the professional level the same way he had in college. It didn't take long for anyone to find the answer. Standing 6'2" and weighing around 228 pounds, Brown possessed a rare combination of size, speed, balance, and power. Defenders quickly realized they weren't trying to stop an ordinary running back. They were trying to bring down a player who seemed to get stronger with every collision. In his very first NFL season, Brown captured both Rookie of the Year honors and the league's Most Valuable Player award, becoming the only player in NFL history to achieve both in the same season. One statistic continues to separate him from every other running back who has played the game. Brown remains the only player in NFL history to average more than 100 rushing yards per game over an entire career. Decades of rule changes, training advances, and offensive innovations still haven't erased what he accomplished. Yet numbers alone don't fully explain why opponents respected him so deeply. His mindset was just as intimidating as his physical ability. After every run, Brown deliberately stood up at his own pace. He calmly handed the ball to the official before walking slowly back to the huddle without showing pain or frustration. To the crowd, it looked routine. To defenders, it sent a powerful message. They had just thrown their hardest hit at him, and he acted as though it barely mattered. Brown also refused to avoid contact simply to protect himself. Running out of bounds wasn't part of his approach unless absolutely necessary. He believed every defender who tackled him should remember how difficult that collision had been. As he famously explained, whenever someone brings you down, make sure they remember how much it hurt to tackle you. That attitude became part of his legend and helped define the fearless style that made him one of football's most dominant players. In 1964, during the prime of his football career, he accepted an opportunity to appear in the Western film Rio Conchos. Traveling to Utah, Brown stepped onto a movie set with virtually no acting experience. He portrayed Sergeant Franklin alongside established stars Richard Boone and Stuart Whitman. Critics generally agreed that he was still learning the craft, but they also noticed something impossible to ignore. Whenever Brown appeared on screen, audiences naturally focused on him. His presence alone demanded attention. That decision soon placed him on another major film set. In 1966, director Robert Aldrich cast Brown in the World War II epic The Dirty Dozen, sending him to England for filming. Brown expected to complete production and return home in time for Cleveland's training camp. Then the weather changed everything. Heavy rain repeatedly shut down filming, pushing the schedule further behind with each passing day. As delays mounted, it became increasingly clear that Brown wouldn't make it back to Cleveland when training camp opened. It was a situation that likely could have been resolved through private conversations between player and team. Instead, events took a very different turn. Back in Ohio, Brown's owner Art Modell publicly announced that no veteran player would receive permission to report late to training camp, including Jim Brown. He added that if Brown failed to arrive by the deadline, he would be suspended without pay and fined for every missed day. What could have remained a private disagreement suddenly became national news. For Jim Brown, the issue was no longer about missing practice. It had become something much more personal. Thousands of miles away, on a rainy movie set in England, he now faced the decision that would permanently reshape both his life and the history of professional football. While filming The Dirty Dozen in England, Brown sat down in his hotel room and wrote a letter that would become one of the most significant retirement announcements in sports history. He explained that within days he would officially retire from professional football. The decision, he wrote, wasn't driven by anger or money. It was about creating the future he envisioned for himself, his family, and, in his own words, for his race. The most memorable part of the letter was remarkably simple. Brown reminded Art Modell that they were both men and that his own dignity mattered just as much to him as Modell's did to the owner. There was no bitterness, no insults, and no dramatic accusations. After making one of the boldest decisions in sports history, Brown signed the letter with two unexpected words: "Your friend, Jim." The Dirty Dozen premiered in June 1967 with an all-star cast that included Lee Marvin, Charles Bronson, Ernest Borgnine, Donald Sutherland, and several other respected actors. Sharing the screen with performers of that caliber could have overwhelmed someone new to acting, but Brown immediately proved he belonged.
Playing Robert T. Jefferson, one of the elite soldiers sent behind enemy lines, Brown delivered one of the film's most memorable action sequences. During the climactic assault, his character sprinted across the rooftops of a French chateau while dropping grenades into ventilation shafts under heavy enemy fire. The intensity of the scene perfectly matched the fearless image football fans already associated with him. Audiences embraced both the movie and Brown's performance. Produced for approximately $5.4 million, The Dirty Dozen became one of the highest-grossing films of 1967, earning more than $45 million worldwide. The success instantly transformed Brown from a retired football legend into a legitimate Hollywood star.
He believed that building a strong economic foundation would allow communities to create their own opportunities instead of waiting for someone else to provide them. Gathered around that table were figures such as Bill Russell, a young Lou Alcindor who would later become Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Willie Davis, Bobby Mitchell, John Wooten, Carl Stokes, and several others. Brown organized the meeting, giving everyone the opportunity to question Ali directly before deciding whether to support him publicly. After hours of conversation, the group emerged united behind Ali, despite knowing the personal and professional consequences they might face. The famous photograph from that gathering, now remembered as the Cleveland Summit, remains one of the defining images of the civil rights era, and it happened because Jim Brown brought those voices together. Brown's commitment to helping others didn't end there. More than 2 decades later, in 1988, he launched the Amerikine program, designed to help people rebuild their lives through education, discipline, and personal responsibility. The program focused on individuals many had already written off, including gang members, former prisoners, and young people searching for a different path. Following the 1992 gang truce in Watts, community violence declined significantly over the next several years. Brown never claimed sole credit for those improvements, but his willingness to invest his own time and reputation demonstrated the same leadership that had defined every stage of his life. Recognition was never his primary motivation. He believed doing the right thing didn't require applause. Years later, even Art Modell publicly admitted that forcing Brown into the retirement decision had been a mistake. In Spike Lee's 2002 documentary, Jim Brown, All-American, Modell acknowledged that making Brown choose between football and his future was one of the worst decisions of his career. Brown never demanded an apology because in his mind, he had already settled that chapter decades earlier with a single letter written in England. Like many influential public figures, Brown's legacy was not without controversy. Throughout his life, he faced several legal issues and allegations involving violence against women. Some cases were dismissed or dropped, while another resulted in a misdemeanor conviction and jail time. Brown later stated publicly that there is no excuse for violence and that a man should never put his hands on a woman. His life, like many complex historical figures, included both extraordinary accomplishments and serious personal shortcomings. A complete understanding of his legacy requires acknowledging both. In his later years, Brown and the city of Cleveland eventually found common ground once again. On September 18, 2016, the Cleveland Browns unveiled an 8-foot bronze statue outside their stadium, honoring the player who had transformed the franchise forever. Depicted carrying the football with his trademarked stiff arm extended, the statue captured Brown exactly as fans remembered him: powerful, determined, and constantly moving forward. Standing before it at age 80, Brown described the dedication as a moment of genuine joy, saying he could feel the emotion throughout his entire body. On May 18, 2023, Jim Brown passed away peacefully at his home in Los Angeles at the age of 87, with his wife Monique by his side. Soon afterward, LeBron James offered a tribute that perfectly captured Brown's lasting influence. "We all stand on your shoulders, Jim Brown." Those words reflected a truth that extended beyond football. Brown changed the NFL, reshaped Hollywood, championed economic empowerment, and inspired countless people to pursue success on their own terms. When you watch his old highlights today, you'll still notice the same slow walk back to the huddle after every run. It wasn't fatigue, it wasn't showmanship, it was confidence. Jim Brown never allowed anyone else to dictate the direction of his life.
Whether on the football field, in Hollywood, or beyond, he always chose his own path. And that's the legacy that continues to inspire generations long after the final whistle.